As you guys know, I don't know how to start the podcast. So it'll either be something along the lines of welcome to Late to the Movies. Wait, no, it'll either be whatever that was or something along the lines of welcome to Late to the Movies. My name is Ben Holt. This is a podcast where my friends and I get to fill in our movie blind spots. Each week we'll pick a film that either I or a guest hadn't seen before and really should have opened the Podbabe doors by now. This week, as referenced already in this podcast and by most culture in the last 60-ish years, is 2001: A Space Odyssey, the 1968 film from Stanley Kubrick. Our third Kubrick, our second Keir Dullea. I'll let you guys try and figure out what the first Keir Dullea film we did was. Left to right across your podcast dial. I actually hid non-video participants, so the robots do not get a shout out, but Lindsey's up first. Hey, Lindsey.
Hello.
Greg's here too.
Hey.
And Ray.
Hi.
And Marshall.
Hello.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. Before we get into what you've watched recently, I should remind at least a couple of us that it doesn't have to be movies. I've included like books, concerts, etc., in what you've seen recently in the past. So, yeah, whoever wants to kick it off, go for it.
We saw Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I was going to say, that felt like a natural segue into, concerts, you say.
I've been to a concert recently.
Oh, how was that?
It was pretty cool. It was like...
Yeah, I don't really know what to say about it. It was awesome.
As someone who didn't really know what to expect, it was like really stunning, like visually, like everyone on stage was dressed in like super snazzy like outfits, like sparkles and like badass looking like electric instruments, and the light show was super crazy, and the music was awesome. So
that's kind of sick.
It was cool.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
I was a bit worried about like what the sort of non-film buff people's experience would be like, but it seemed like everybody enjoyed it all right.
I like that he didn't really like hold your hand too much through like they only announced some of it. The rest of it is like, you know what this is from. Don't make me tell you.
Yeah, Lindsey and I were talking about it too afterwards, because I think it would have been a different experience if there would have been like clips from the movies playing while the music was playing.
Yeah.
And part of me thought, I wondered if it was a licensing issue, but then I read online that there's like a different concert experience called The World of Hans Zimmer, where he's like not performing with the band or whatever. And for that, they do play clips from the movies. So I think it's an intentional choice for like the Hans Zimmer live shows, because I think they want to keep the focus on the musicians. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, if there were clips, it would have detracted from...
You'd just be watching the clips the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
And you definitely intended to watch the people performing at this show. It was great, including a 67-year-old German guy who was just having the best time.
Yeah.
Except that he had pneumonia. Poor guy.
Ooh.
Yeah, sorry.
But as a
Baltimore.
contrast, I saw a couple days after that Avatar: The Last Airbender in concert, like with the symphony performing the score. It was so cool. It did have like clips and like actual like dialogue from the show, like overlaid with the score pieces too. But it was amazing. I cried multiple times. I loved it.
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to go, so I don't have an opinion.
We should rewatch
Marshall
Avatar.
had to work. Yeah, you should definitely rewatch it. Always a good
I
time
feel like
for
we
a
haven't
rewatch.
watched it in like years. I bet
Yeah,
you Ren would like it now.
I bet you Renly would love it. I mean, there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of fighting and stuff. I don't know if she's.
She
is
liked
ready for
it
that?
when we watched it with her when she was like, I don't know, how old was
Baby.
she?
Dude.
She was
Oh,
like
really?
2 or 3. Yeah.
I used to put it on and she'd like it. Yeah. Yeah, we should rewatch. I've only seen it, I think, 45 times. So I need to rewatch on that one.
Is it good? I've never seen it.
It's great.
I've never seen it.
No,
It's
never
unbelievable.
watched it. I know, it just completely missed me. I don't know why. And then like I got to start hanging out with people in my mid-20s and everyone was like, this is formative for me. And it's like literally never heard anyone talk about this when I was the correct age when it was happening, apparently.
Well, I
wasn't
got into
really-
it in college. Yeah.
I wasn't really a Nickelodeon kid, so I didn't watch it kind of when it was airing, but it was one of the many shows I watched in the early months of COVID, where I was just like, I guess I'll just binge a bunch of anime.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on that list, as was Cora. I enjoyed both of them.
Oh, I think we've just been rewatching stuff. I feel like I finally got to like watch Ponyo, because I put it on for the kids, but I never really get to watch it. And I finally watched the other day. And I was like, oh, this is really good.
Turns out.
If you don't get to catch it all, or not, like if you miss parts, it's already a really weird movie. So as soon as you start missing things, you're like, whoa, I got no idea what's happening. But when you sit down and watch it, I was like, wow, this is really good. Really enjoyed it.
It's funny because I feel like every time, I don't know, I think like late summer, early fall, there's like a sort of Fathom Events-ish Studio Ghibli fest that happens sort of loosely, just plays a lot of Studio Ghibli films in theaters. And I feel like anytime I'm at your house, it's sort of that also.
Fair.
Honestly, we try not to put on too many bad movies for the kids. Like if I'm going to watch something, I want it to be something that I'm going to like. That's good, because you might get stuck watching it like 40 times. So you got to be careful what you pick. You know what I mean?
So you can't pick anything that has like a number of sequels, because you always have to watch the highest number.
No. Yeah, you really got to avoid that.
Yep. I have like factored that into my decision making of what movies to put on.
I guess Ghibli's good for that because they're all one-offs.
Yeah.
But also, like you said, a lot of them are pretty mature, so you only got a handful of kid-friendly ones.
There's like two. There really is only like two.
It's spooky season. It's as we're recording this September, but it's in the 50s right now here, so it's spooky season. Been watching some spooky stuff. I watched Child's Play for the first time, actually, which was fun. That's the first movie in the Chucky series that still is ongoing as a current TV show that people like. And I don't think I ever sat down and just watched Child's Play. It's fun. Good time. And then I didn't want to go to bed yet at this night. And I was like, what else is on? And I've been meaning to like work through early Mike Flanagan stuff. So I watched Ouija, Origin of Evil, the 2016 prequel to the 2014 Ouija. But then it's produced by Blumhouse and obviously Hasbro. And they were like, Ouija sucked and it made money, but we're embarrassed at how bad it was, I guess. So they hired Mike Flanagan to make the prequel to it a couple years later. It's pretty good. It's the absolute best a movie about Ouija boards that is approved by Hasbro could possibly be. It's PG-13, and you're like, he really wanted to let it rip, but it's still pretty nasty, and that's why I love Mike Flanagan.
That movie doesn't. By title alone, that is not a movie I would ever watch.
Yeah, why would you seek it out? I don't know. I wanted to, so it's good. His early stuff's cool, man. Oculus is really good. If you haven't seen it, they're all like pretty quick. His early stuff too. So
I think the only movie I've seen of his is Dr. Sleep. I mean, I could be wrong, but horror just generally not something I actively seek out. So something has to get like a lot of praise for me to be like, all right, I'll watch it.
Yeah. Flanagan does a really interesting thing where his adaptation of Dr. Sleep is a sequel to the novel version of The Shining and an adaptation of the novel version of Dr. Sleep, and then also a sequel to the Kubrick Shining, which they end in very different places in terms of, in one of them, the hotel still exists, and in the novel, it doesn't at the end. And so he does like an interesting way of threading the needle in Dr. Sleep. So, and paying homage to the Stanley Kubrick version. Speaking of which,
Stanley Kubrick.
Who's that?
12 years, I think Shining's 1980. Does that sound right? 12 years before The Shining, he made a movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey. We're going to talk about it today. I had seen this movie before. How about y'all?
I
hadn't seen it.
I had seen it once before, and not that long ago. Within the last year, I saw it for the first time.
I randomly, like, my English 3 teacher in high school, like, we had like 2 books we had to read, and he was like, also everyone watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I don't even think he ever explained why. But yeah, that was a weird thing to watch in the summer as a 16-year-old. I was like, man, oof. It's tough to watch on a small screen. The pace is pretty brutal for a 16-year-old.
Yeah, in the summer too.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't watch it in the optimal viewing environment for this movie. I feel like it loses something. You know what I mean? It would have been cool to see it in like a movie theater or something.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I watched it.
I've never seen it in a theater.
I feel like it'd be really way cooler in a theater. I watched it on my cell phone. I don't have a lot of time with the kids, so I put it in a Ziploc bag and I watched it over the course of a week while I showered. I would just bring it into the shower.
Nice.
In a Ziploc bag.
The way Kubrick intended.
As Stanley Kubrick intended, I imagine.
Yeah.
He probably would approve because it seemed like he was into the idea of video calls. So, like, I don't know.
Oh, God, just peering into the future, every piece of this movie. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they had the screens in front of the, airplane chairs as well. I was like, I don't think that was a thing in 1968.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you're definitely
there were so
right.
many things that just felt so normal and
anti-gravity toilets.
Well, that was interesting.
That was probably the funniest shot of the whole movie. You're just like reading all the rules about how to use the toilet.
That was really funny. I was like, this is supposed to be really funny. Like it has to be. Like
it's funny. Kubrick's funny. People think he's serious. He's funny.
There were definitely some things where I was like, this has to be like what someone in the 60s would have thought the future was. Ray really liked the Capri Suns that they serve on the plane.
Like the vegetables or whatever.
Yeah. You drink from a straw.
So, yeah. Well, let's get into it. Who wants to give us a 1-minute plot summary of 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I can do it. There's probably only like 17 seconds of plot.
Yeah.
They go to they find a obelisk on the moon, like a monolith. They send a couple astronauts to find its twin monolith over near Jupiter. And along the way, their computer goes crazy and kills everyone except for one of them, who makes it to the monolith, spends 20 minutes going through a Windows 98 screensaver, and then ends up in a room where he dies and comes back to the giant space baby.
Yeah.
At Earth, maybe. And he's a giant or something. The end.
I forgot the beginning.
Yeah. You do the dawn of man.
I didn't want to talk about I didn't like that part. I feel like it's weird they ripped off Barbie.
Yeah. I was wondering who was going to get there first on that joke. Yeah. It's rude that they did that.
It does start with the monolith. That's not really like much of the plot, though. I guess you should mention, though, the monolith is there too, huh?
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes of the movie.
It is a lot of the movie. The pacing on this movie is it's slow. It's very, very slow, obviously.
Slow.
Yeah.
It's a little too slow for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
it was too slow for the mood that I was in. I was very antsy and distracted and also tired. So the slowness was really tough. But Marshall and I had watched like a couple of months ago this movie called Sasquatch Sunset. That's like a weird Austin film that's just like slice of life of some Sasquatches, and it has no plot, and you just watch these Sasquatches, and it's weird and ridiculous and gross and like, I don't know, kind of funny and good, but
like no dialogue.
No dialogue. And so when we were watching the beginning of this one, I was like, oh no, is this going to be a Sasquatch sunset thing? And then when we finally got to some dialogue, I was like, no, it's not going to be. But then like it kind of was that pace the whole time of like just kind of watching things slowly unfold. I was like, oh God.
So I only had seen it once before, and I remember most of it, but like the thing I thought was like, I remember it's like wicked long. I was like, this is like a 3.5 hour movie. I remember being really weird and being confused. And then I started watching. I was like, I went to put it on. I was like, well, this thing's not nearly 3.5 hours. Like, it's not that long. And then you start watching, like, oh, this is why I thought it was 3.5 hours. It just does not move quickly through its 2 hour, whatever runtime.
Yeah, this is shorter than at least your last episode, because that was Eyes Wide Shut. So you're back to back on the Kubricks.
Yeah, it wasn't like that long of a movie.
No.
What was it, a bit over 2 hours or something like that?
It's like 220 something, I want to say.
Yeah, that's not that long.
But also, when you threw it on, just like remembering when we did Tar, how long before you checked to make sure like the screen was working.
I remembered that it's a long time that like it's just black.
And did you let the entire intermission play?
Yes.
Okay, good. You went to the bathroom, you went to the lobby, got some snacks. Yeah.
Yep, made some cookies, you know.
Right.
It feels like for the Blu-ray or whatever that it's definitely trimmed. Like the intermission's not that long. I was like, if this was in the theater, this would be several minutes or something.
Yeah. Yeah. The 4K of it, which a friend of mine that I was talking about this with at work, Brady, he's been on some episodes. He was like Blu-ray.com, which reviews Blu-rays and 4Ks. The reviewer of the 4K of 2001 referred to it as the best 4K he's ever seen. That actually captures the theatrical experience of watching it in theaters with his dad. I'll just say that 4K is in Massachusetts right now. I had to watch it on YouTube.
We watched it on Amazon.
Yeah. But
I was hoping my one buddy who has like way more movies than me, which is saying a lot if you know how many movies I have, would have the 4K version, and he did not. So I just watched the Blu-ray.
It looks good. I had my sister go to the basement and check to see if there was at least like a digital code, so I wouldn't have to pay for it, but there wasn't. But I didn't want to drive over there, so oh well.
I had to give it to Jeff $4.
Yeah.
I'll probably invoice you, but
okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Lindsey, you said you like weren't in the mood for it. That is like the one pitfall of this podcast. This is when it's like, well, we really have to get to this, and this one especially. I think we're kind of talking around. It's hard to know where to exactly jump in, and I feel like it's not a thing that I would turn on a lot. It caught me in the right mood for it when I watched it yesterday, which was great. I wonder if watching it for a first time in that like headspace and not exactly knowing where it's going and be like, oh my God, is this forever? When you're just hanging out with the hominins in the Veld, that might make you even more anxious. I don't know. But,
yeah,
it's an interesting film to watch in any condition aside from theaters. I would think, not that I've seen it in a theater, but you really need to be locked in. I feel like.
I was not locked in for this viewing. I remember liking it a lot more last time actually than this time.
I was gonna say we talked about it afterwards, and you were like, "That was great." I still like you really liked it. Okay.
I still liked it this time, but not nearly as much. I think you have to be in the right mood for it because it's so slow. You really have to. You just kind of have to be on its like wavelength. I feel like, and the other night, I don't know why I was just not as into it.
Yeah. It happens.
I feel like it's something I'll grow to appreciate more with time, and like maybe I'll watch it again. But yeah, it just caught me at a bad day. But like I do appreciate it, but I tell you what, after it was done, I was like, what the hell was that?
I was that way the first time, even though I liked it a lot. I was like, I don't know what just happened at all. I don't know if you're supposed to. I don't think you're totally supposed to understand. I don't know.
One thing that helped me on this watch is watching with headphones on to like be like sort of immersed in the sound.
Interesting.
And that's why I choose to be single forever.
See, we didn't have headphones.
Yeah.
I don't know if it took away from the movie, but every time there was a really long scene that was just drones, me and Ray would turn to each other and just keep going, wah, wah, wah.
We would sing with it. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. You make your own headphones. You make your own surround sound.
Yeah, that enhanced our experience.
I think it did.
Yeah.
I had a lot of comments throughout the movie, so I think that probably took us out of the mood of.
I feel like this movie looks wicked good.
It does. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like,
well,
I didn't vote for like it's in the 60s, right?
It does.
Yes.
So I didn't like the whole beginning part. I had problems with the makeup and the scenery. I wasn't a fan of that. But the rest of it,
they used real monkeys, damn it.
Ray had a lot of Ray was very upset because all the animals they kept seeing in the initial scene was like, she was like, that's a leopard. They live in the rainforest. They would not eat a zebra.
I was thinking that about the monkeys too. I was like, the monkeys don't live in like Texas or whatever the heck this is.
Right.
She said that too.
Yeah.
She's like, that's a deer. That's also a rainforest animal. It would not live here.
Yeah.
Those were transitional beings. Those were hominins. They were like almost human. They're not really monkeys. They use tools.
No, I was upset.
There's the match cut. We haven't said match cut yet. Now we have, in case there's nerds listening that are going to be mad if we don't mention the match cut that happens when he throws the bone up in the air and it turns into the Barbie logo.
Oh.
Yes.
Anyway. So this movie, not to skip all the way to the end, nominated for 4 Oscars, wins for special effects. I mean,
like, what else would even be nominated that year? I mean, I just like feel bad for anything that had an effect in it that thought they would have a chance.
There's so much of this that feels like showing off, for lack of a better word. Just like, he's just like, watch this shit. Like, I love the thing with the pen. That's sort of the first time that you get the sense that like, oh, this is just a dude who knows he's on a different level, where the pen's floating and you're like, I've seen shitty sci-fi movies. I know that's on a string. And then the lady like takes it out of the air and hands it to the guy.
The
like,
way
oh shit.
she hands it, like grabs it, is just like, if you've ever seen like a magician do a magic show, that's how they grab things to show you that like, look, like you didn't think I'd be able to touch this for some reason. And they touch it and they like do it just like that. So I was like, oh, that's really funny. You know what I mean?
It's crazy. It's 100% the like the voila of the trick there. Yeah.
Crazy that like such a simple sort of effect is so impressive. Like, I mean, because there's so many gorgeous like visual effects in this movie, but like that one, you're just like, oh shit, that was really convincing. We watched like a little special feature like the day after we watched the movie, and it kind of like talked about that moment and how it was tape on a glass in the foreground that you couldn't see. And supposedly, I can't remember who it was, but someone was like, oh, like if you look really closely, like you can kind of see like the tape that like whatever the pin's on. And I was like looking closely, I was like, I don't fucking see it. So I mean, just like
double-sided tape
that
holds up so well.
Double-sided tape had just been invented.
Nice.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah,
Much
there was just like parts where I was like, what are they doing here? Every time they show like the planets and then the sun like peeks over the planet or something, like they're getting a lot of money, a lot of use out of that flashlight you bought or whatever.
Yeah, over the monolith. Yeah. It's always peeking out over the monolith.
Yeah.
Much like the poster behind Marshall of Interstellar, where Chris Nolan tried to make like a grounded sci-fi movie, Kubrick was interested in making like a, to the best of their knowledge at the time, here's what this might be actually if we were to be in a quasi space-bound society. And it has like, especially in the early parts of it, it's lots of like fun sort of sight gags. We mentioned the toilet already, but there's like a Howard Johnson's on the moon or whatever, and things like that going on. He has the video call. And I think it kind of hit me watching it this time that you do that first 20-ish minutes. There's still no dialogue, but it goes from like, you know, the early man primate type guys, the bone in the air. They see this monolith, something happens. They have this like technological advance and they immediately use these tools for like war. And then it like match cuts with the spaceship. And then it's like 10 minutes ish, probably less, of classical music showing you like the equivalent of sort of B-roll of like space tourism. And you're like, wait, what's up with that monolith and those monkeys though? Is that going to come into play? How is this related?
Greg told me at the beginning, because I made some kind of comment about the leopard jumping out and just attacking that monkey. And he's like, you got to wait. It's going to come back. I'm not going to tell you when, but that leopard's going to come back and attack someone.
When you least expect it.
It grabs Dave on the ship later.
There's definitely like probably a fun, I don't know, I feel like early YouTube, this was the kind of thing that would happen. But when the guy gets like knocked into space by one of the pods, somebody could have made like it look like the leopard hit him and sent him like tumbling off into the void. And you're like, see, told you the leopard was coming back.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of that, like just B-roll of, you know, a ship floating around, and then there's some like music playing. Like I feel like that was a lot of the movie.
Oh, it slaps though. It's so good.
It's I like the music a lot. You know what I mean? And
again, with headphones, it works really well too.
I feel like I have to constantly remind myself though, because it's nearly impossible to like try to put yourself in like the theater in 1968 when this movie came out. This shit was like blowing people's minds that it like looked as good as it looked. Like people were just like, oh, they were eating it up, right? Like what we look now and like, oh my God, the pacing of this movie is so slow. How many movies have we seen with spaceships? Like at the time, all of the sci-fi movies were like shitty quality B movies that like weren't convincing at all, you know, were like shot in studios with like really crappy backdrops and like unconvincing ships, you know, like really haphazardly thrown together and like set design and stuff. And this, I mean, him and the author spent so much time with NASA and like sort of talking with scientists. They're like, all right, like, you know, to Ben's point earlier, to the best of y'all's knowledge, how do we make this sort of realistic? And I think, yeah, if you like put it in that context of that time period, you're like, this was so impressive and captivating that it makes so much sense that like the young, you know, film students at the time, like Lucas and Spielberg and guys like that, saw this and really just like, this just like changed the game for like the entire film industry. So
I feel like this thing still looks good. I really like the way like the ships look. I like the space station. I feel like the space station looks better because it like spins. I feel like the things look better when they're like when they have a little bit more movement to them. Some of the pods, like when they're just like kind of like floating and it's just the background that kind of moves, I feel like, you know, lose a little bit of it. But
that's
like
impressive.
Yeah. Well, that space station when it spins, I was like, wow, this looks like really nice still.
Yeah.
And how cool is the set spinning from inside?
Fucking oh my God. Yeah, the big centrifuge that they built to do it, and it's like, I don't know if you get to do that anymore. It's like, how are we going to do this? And it's like, I don't know, just build a big fucking spinning set. Like, stop making it hard.
The only
Just
like kind
everything.
of similar thing I can think to recently, and obviously, you know, so many fucking modern filmmakers are inspired by Kubrick's work, but they sort of did a similar thing in Inception where they like constructed that hotel hallway that like Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like fighting the dude in the like hallways doing this number. Sort of a similar idea where they like built the set on this like contraption where they could like spin it around.
Didn't they do that in Nightmare on Elm Street too? The original one, isn't that how they drag her across like the room? Is it's the whole room spins? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
The first Nightmare on Elm Street.
There's another Nightmare on Elm Street that has a spinning room. I think it's one of the sequels, but famously, a movie that maybe no one has seen, but you've probably heard the subtitle of it as a punchline, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, uses the same spinning room as one of the Freddy sequels to have somebody do like a dance across the ceiling. So Breakin' is about breakdancing. So it's a guy that's just like, but like if you look, it's like the same as somebody getting like nightmare murdered on the ceiling in a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel is like this guy doing like breakdancing on the ceiling.
Crazy
cool.
that like nobody's seen this movie, but that Electric Boogaloo line is still being used to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah,
no one even know what that comes from, you know?
Breakin' 2. They gotta do breakdances to like save the community center. It's an 80s movie.
Next month on the pod, it's all breaking movies.
I like when the lady first comes into the 0G spaceship, the pen one, and to be like, why can this lady walk when there's no gravity? Like, I don't know, right grip on her shoes.
Grip shoes.
Grip shoes.
Print it right on her shoes. It gives the audience all they need.
They thought about it. That the way she's walking so weirdly with the Velcro shoes, the couple other shots, all the like the mid-century shit in the space station when he gets to Clavius base and he's like in the boardroom, all of that stuff is great.
When he's in the orange leaf.
Yeah, I love how everything looks. It's all so cool. There's so many visual gags.
The
big chairs are cool.
They look like they were an orange leaf on that the base right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
His seats and the tables look just like.
Yeah, they're just getting froyo.
He said it was a restaurant. It was an orange leaf.
Yeah, it was an orange leaf. It was.
Ray got mad when they get on the moon to see the monolith, and they're like walking to the monolith, and she's like, "That's not how you would walk on the moon. It's nothing like you know, what it looks like when they walk on the moon. And then she's like, oh wait, they hadn't walked on the moon yet. She says, I'm like, oh, I'm surprised they didn't make it look more like when we walked on the moon. And then she's like, wait, we had.
Wait a minute. It came out in 1968, but obviously they've been developing it for a minute at that point. That's when it very famously switches to the handheld camera that they're holding, like someone's like in line with the guys as they're walking down to the monolith. I think the only other use of handheld is when Dave gets back in to the spaceship and he's going to deactivate Hal, and there's like a handheld over his shoulder too. And I don't know why, it just is like, oh, it's cool. This is great. This feels like different and weird and unsettling. And they take a picture in front of it, and then it like makes that crazy noise, and then it's 18 months later and this guy's running in a circle, and you're like, hell yeah.
I really like the monoliths. Now they make me think of the robots from Interstellar, because those are also just shiny black rectangles.
Yeah. Again, it's too bad that Kubrick ripped that off too.
I know. He's just not original. But I like the monoliths a lot. The only thing I could think of the whole time was like, imagine we just dug up a square on the moon. I feel like that's the worst way to find out there's aliens. What do you do with that? Like, well, I guess there's aliens. We dug up a big metal square on the moon. But like, what is this? This does nothing for me.
Let's go send this guy to take a picture, I guess.
Like you get nothing. That's the worst way to find out there's aliens. You know nothing about them. You just know like there has to be. This is a 4 million year old metal square on the moon.
Yeah. We carbonated it. It's like, it's definitely at least 4 million years old and was clearly put here intentionally by someone. Yeah, I think we'd be pretty freaked out. And you can see like they don't really get too into it, but the government's very hush hush about it.
I think that's an aspect of it I definitely like appreciated more as like an older person. Like, oh yeah, of course that this would involve like government conspiracy and like, you know, not letting the public know about it. I'm like, yeah, that's how it would go down. And it extends even to they haven't actually told the crew what they're doing either. Yeah.
Why I like going to Jupiter. They ask what his name is, Floyd or whatever. They're like, well, how long do we have to keep up the cover story? He's like, well, I don't know. You know, the council will decide. And that's like 18 months later. And I was like, they must have told everyone by now, right? And it's like, no, it doesn't seem like it.
Nope. This is the movie Kubrick made after Dr. Strangelove. So he's still has some knack for like satire about government operation that is bleeding through into this, I feel like, especially that segment. So yeah, we get like 20-ish minutes with the monkeys, another little bit with Floyd, and then also an extremely different vibe. And then we're on the ship with the two guys that are awake, the three dudes that are asleep, in Hal, and that's a different vibe. And that is, you mentioned George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Spielberg constantly throughout his career doing stuff to measure himself against or just trying to adapt stuff that Kubrick was working on. And I feel like all of this sequence in the ship, the rest of the movie really is just like probably what really got to Spielberg, I have to think. I mean, now, the sci-fi thriller is essentially the way that it's been since this movie didn't really exist before this movie. And this is like the exact formula pretty much for the rest of it. This is Jurassic Park, right? It's crazy. It's so fucking good. Sorry.
Lindsey and Ray, did you expect Hal to be more of this movie? Because Hal, it takes a long time to get to this scene, and Hal's not around very long after this. Well, relatively. Hal doesn't do much.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know the premise. I knew Hal was a character because everyone talks about Hal, but yeah. I don't know. What did you think, Ray?
I think I was just confused overall about how little anybody was in it. I think that's, you know, so like he was in it the correct amount, like as far as ratio goes, but like, I don't know.
He should be first billed. He has the most lines.
Probably.
So Kubrick's like goes out of his way to like rip so much dialogue out of it. And then Arthur C. Clarke, who's developing the novelization of it at the same time. The novel comes out after the movie, but he fills in a lot of blanks, and there's a lot more dialogue and a lot more explanation of everything that's happening, if you're curious. They have pretty different endings, actually. But yeah. Sorry, Greg, you were talking.
Oh, I feel like the first time I went to see, like watch this, the only thing I knew was like, oh, the Hal is in it and fucking kills everybody. So I thought that was going to be like the whole plot of the movie, which I guess it is a lot because it's just not a very plot heavy movie. But like, Hal doesn't do much. Like it's as soon as we meet Hal malfunctions maybe and kills everybody like in 2 scenes.
Yeah, it happens very quickly.
I mean, I do think like at least in my opinion, the most like fascinating and interesting aspect of this movie. And I think whenever somebody thinks of 2001: A Space Odyssey, I think probably more often than not, the first thing they think about is Hal. And I think it was just a really interesting choice on Kubrick's part to, like Ben said, they took a lot of the dialogue out, and I think he sort of directed the 2 astronaut characters to kind of be pretty stoic in their like delivery or whatever, because he wanted sort of the humanization of this artificially intelligent like entity to like, almost as if like Hal appears to have like more emotions than the actual humans do. And like, I think, watching the movie now, it still seems like really effective. And even crazy to think about too, just because like AI has like blown up in the last like 3 years or whatever in ways that I think make this movie like oddly relevant considering when it came out. But yeah, it's just another thing where you can say it's fascinating, like how much this movie, was predicting, and some of it not super accurate, but like a lot of it was like not far off.
Well, and how many movies now are there that like the AI or the robots come to life and try to kill the humans, and that's like the sole plot of the movie, right? Like iRobot or like whatever. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones, right? And this is like a segment of it, and it's like I'm like, oh, been there, done that, but it was like, that's the first one probably.
All the Hal stuff I think is my favorite stuff in the movie. I just have so many questions about Hal and like what's going on, because I feel like maybe I missed something, but I feel like a lot of it is just kind of up for interpretation. What's going on with Hal, and is Hal broken? Like what you know what I mean? I like that Hal talks to, I think, Dave about like the mission's weird. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's weird. I heard these things and this. And I was like, oh, wow. Like when I was rewatching, I was like, oh, I forgot that Hal doesn't know what the real mission is. And then you get a little further and you're like, wait, no, Hal does know. What the hell? What is Hal doing? Is Hal just like playing games over here with Dave? Like, because Hal did know the real mission, but Hal's like, oh, what do you think, Dave? Like, this is weird, huh? And like is Hal already broken, or is Hal like just bored? You know what I mean?
Hal's kind of freaking out because he has, perhaps you can intuit, and I'm sure the book tells you, because I guess that's just what Arthur C. Clarke does, but he has kind of conflicting orders, right? Because he's got to conceal it, so he sort of has to lie, but then he has like the prime robot directives of not doing harm, but the mission's coming first. And they're in such close quarters and they're talking so much, and there is, I think this is controversial, he's not right about the checkmate that he claims earlier. So like, is he already messing up there, or is he just like testing out lying? Yeah. Apparently it's like an inevitable checkmate, but it could have been delayed by like 2 moves more than what he suggested. It's something like that.
Never would have known that.
Yeah. Neither would I. That's just me looking on the internet. Cannot personally verify.
Question.
That is an interesting theory, though.
I don't know if I'm just kind of empathic for the robot, but if you guys were playing chess against Hal, you wouldn't ask Hal to go easy on you, would you? My immediate thought was like, I would feel patronizing if I was like, Hal, can you like set it to like an easy one? I'd be like, nah, just beat me in 4 moves again, Hal. It's fine. Reset the game.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
I would be like, hey, I would see if he has like a tutor function, and like on chess.com, where it can sort of, based on your ranking, give you appropriate level of difficulty. maybe
I
that
feel like that's rude.
We're going to be doing this for a while. Like, if you want, like, you can, don't go easy on me, but like teach me how to get better so we can have like a straight up match eventually, maybe. Don't just kick my ass every time and not tell me how.
Yeah, I like that he doesn't explain a lot about what's happening with Hal. Because then, like, I always wonder too, is like, because they never even like, you never find out for sure if Hal's made a mistake, right? Because they never go that far. So they don't tell you that Hal's actually made a mistake. So there's always the chance that Hal's just killing these people because he's like, these people are about to kill me. I saw them talking about it. I'm going to murder all these people before they come murder me because I don't want to die.
And his main directive is to like protect the mission. There's a thing that, like, I don't know how true this is, but he only takes control of the ship once they're both outside of it in like space, because he can't take over until his superiors aren't there. So technically that's when he can be in control. And then once Dave's back on board, he doesn't actually do anything to stop him.
I mean, I guess he can't really. I mean, I don't know.
They never go into it. I don't know.
He can move every part of the ship around, right? He can close and open doors. He could throw a chair at him or something. I don't know.
I like all that stuff a lot, though.
It's so good. Hal's cool. When you asked, like, maybe you're just more empathetic to robots, I was wondering if you're going to get into Hal's death scene, which I think is like one of the hardest to watch sequences in movies. I don't know why, how they get there. I mean, they do a really intentional thing where all of the human dialogue is very non-emotional, very to the point, very rigid, but Hal is the only person in the entire movie who talks about his feelings. I feel like, he's the only one who uses any of that terminology. And the first time you hear someone talking in like almost 10 minutes is when the astronauts are being interviewed, and he's like, oh yeah, maybe Hal's like a real person. And it's like, oh, okay. So they at least put that in your mind before you get into all this stuff. Yeah, who's to say if he has real feelings? Not for me to say. And yeah, that death scene is fucking harrowing. It's like really disturbing. I don't know what it is. There's something just like, and then I don't know, Lindsey and Marshall, if you thought as his voice gets lower and lower, you're like, oh, this is where Hans got the Sardaukar sound from.
I mean, I think the sound design in general in this movie is really underappreciated because, like, I think the movie's more famous for its visuals. But I think probably for me, what makes that sequence the most like uncomfortable is sort of how Hal's voice gets like distorted and like really low, and then starts singing that song, and it just is like really unsettling because a lot of the movie is absent of music and really focuses in on just like Dave's breathing and stuff like that, and I think that just adds to sort breathing. Of just adds to how uncomfortable it is. So yeah, I don't know, it's just really eerie.
It's really unsettling. I can't put my finger on it. A lot of that sequence plays out like a thriller, like the anxiety that, over a full decade later will turn into Alien, right? But it's like, I don't know. I don't know what it is about it. There's just something fundamentally disturbing about that scene that I can't quite put my finger on.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, a tidbit that we heard when we watched the special feature was that the song that Hal sings is actually a thing that existed at the time when they were like trying to teach, I guess, computers like how to speak. Someone had, I don't know if it was a theory or what, but that it would be easier to teach a computer speech via song than it would be, I guess, just normal speaking. And so the Daisy song is a thing that was actually a song that a computer sang. So like they pulled that from real life.
Yikes.
That's cool.
Steve Jobs is obsessed with making computers say hello to you. And this is probably why.
But yeah,
Max don't sing, I don't think.
all the Hal stuff is definitely my favorite. I have a colleague named Dave who asks for a lot of unreasonable stuff all the time, and then I always post in my group chat at work the GIF of Hal saying, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that."
Yeah, that's on the AFI 100 years, 100 quotes list, I'm sure. It's pretty high up there.
I think I don't remember what number it was exactly, but I remember when they did the whatever heroes and villains, 50 heroes and villains or something. Hal was like super high on that list. I think he was in the top 5 maybe.
He's great. The way like Hal delivers all the lines are so good.
Yeah,
because they're like so like they're not emotionless, but they're like, especially when he's like killing the people and stuff, and he's just like so, I don't know, matter of fact about it. When Dave's like, I'm gonna come in through the emergency air thing, he's like, I think you'll have a difficult time without your helmet, Dave.
This conversation can no longer serve any purpose.
Yes.
Goodbye, Dave.
Goodbye, Dave.
So that's what you should tell Dave if he's like pushing back on you. This conversation can no longer
almost kind of like this sort of tone in which he speaks. I mean, this movie obviously came out like a couple decades before this movie, but like almost like Hannibal Lecter speaking to Clarice in Silence of the Lambs, just sort of that like matter of fact, like I'm smarter than you and like 5 moves ahead of you.
Yes,
sort of makes me think of some of those exchanges.
You are not wrong. That's for sure.
It makes Hal very creepy, but also Hal isn't like particularly unlikable either. Like I don't know. I think it's because they're a fun character. Like I like Hal a lot. Maybe it's because they're a robot. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is.
He was born in the 90s.
I mean, so I think it's like very intentional because, you know, like Kubrick did, you know, like very much try to almost make Hal the most human-like character by giving him like emotions and feelings. I think that's why like a lot of audience members sort of empathize with him in this strange way, even though the scene where he's just like murdering all the humans that are asleep, I'm just like, damn, Hal. That's cool.
Every time I'm like, oh, Hal, this is fucked, Hal.
What?
I also the intermission is right after it shows him like reading their lips, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a pretty
shot's crazy too.
It's a wicked cool shot, like when you see through his eye, and you just see the mouth movement, and you're like, oh, these guys are so fucked. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Dave was thinking though. Like his plan, there's no plan I would come up with where I'm gonna outsmart this fucking robot. He's not gonna know what I'm talking about.
I mean, it's a great like, you know, sort of turn, right? Because I think, you know, when it came out, no one knew where the story was going. I'm pretty sure everyone's like, oh yeah, they're safe. Like they're in this thing he can't hear, blah, blah, blah. And then to see him like lip reading and going into the intermission is like perfect for tension and stakes, right? Because like I think coming out of the intermission, everyone in the audience was just gonna be like, oh shit, like what is this robot about to do? Like,
yeah, right? I can't go get my popcorn. I gotta fucking wait and see what this robot's gonna do.
It's like nervous energy.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I thought was so disturbing about that death scene was like him basically begging Dave not to kill him, but like it was still in that weird monotone kind of voice, and he's like, you know, doing the like, I know I've made bad choices, but you know, I'm feeling a lot better now. Like it was such a weird thing to hear in like a robotic voice. I don't know.
There's no
way like childlike, you know, like trying to, you know, tell your parent that you're like sorry for your actions and not to be punished.
Mm-hmm. That whole like little monologue he delivers there while Dave's killing him. I told Ray when my boss finally decides to fire me, I'm gonna say this same monologue to them. I'm sorry. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm feeling much better now. I can do better. You don't need to do this.
Will you stop, Dave?
Won't you stop it? You don't need to do this. I can do better. I can be better. I know I
wrote an explanation or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, that's, oh god, it's so disturbing. Yeah, it's the sort of childlike sort of innocence that he still can evoke in that moment. But then, and there's no way in the 60s they were thinking about this, but for whatever reason, a lot of like relationship advice people are coming up in my algorithm on Instagram now. And a lot of like the arguments he's using are sort of like what like kind of like abusers are saying when they're apologizing to their partners. a lot of times is sort of the language he's using there too. And I'm like, I don't think this is, I mean, they're looking into the future to like iPads and FaceTime and stuff, but I don't think they knew exactly how relationship dynamics were going to evolve over the next 60 years.
I know I killed all your friends, Dave, but I can do better.
I'm feeling much better now. I know I've made a lot of bad decisions recently.
There's no more crew left for me to kill. Obviously, I can't do this again.
Yeah. And I feel like there's like a helplessness too, where Hal has to be like, well, it's not like this guy's going to think I'm not going to kill him now.
It's funny to think though, right? Because it's like the sort of, you know, to this point in the movie, sort of, I think Kubrick's intention has been to sort of make you think of Hal as this like human-like character. And clearly he's gone like, you know, few wires loose, you know, starts killing all the humans or whatever. But so like he in sort of his humanity, if you will, is trying to get the human to forgive him for, you know, human error, which is, you know, but like when we're first introduced to Hal, you know, he's almost like bragging about like how the computers have never been wrong, never made any mistakes. And now he's just like, you know, I made a mistake. This is what humans are known for. Like, my bad, bro. But like, come on, you know, don't shut me off.
Yeah. You were mentioning how they wanted him to be the more like human character. It just reminds me of the scene a little bit before this where like Frank gets like a birthday video message and like just does not give a fuck. He's just like, whatever. And he like his parents sing him happy birthday or something, and like he's just like, okay, I'll move this. I guess he's suntanning or something.
Yeah.
It's like a little high up.
Yeah. That scene,
I'm like, oh, Frank kind of sucks. I feel like he's even like, I don't know. I already like Hal more than the astronauts at that point, because when he's just like kind of ordering Hal around, like you could at least throw in like a please. You know what I mean?
He says please a couple times, but it's just very much like he doesn't mean it.
Yeah.
He sucks.
He's just kind of like treating Hal like he's like a servant.
Yeah. Not our good boy.
Him out of the pod too.
Yeah. Cut his airline, send him tumbling through space. I do feel bad for him in the, like, he's obviously, you know, immediately dead in that situation anyway, but that like Dave goes through all the trouble of like getting his body back, and then he's like, well, fuck it. And then he just like tosses him away. Yeah. And,
I like when Dave gets fucking launched out of the thing, because they keep showing the explosive bolts sign too. Like you know you're gonna have to deal with these explosive bolts. They show it like 5 times, like very clear center of the screen. You know what I mean? But it looks real nice when they fucking shoot him into that thing.
Yeah.
I think what's cool about that moment too, is just that like you're expecting like sort of the sound of like a blast or an explosion or something, and it just played like dead quiet. It's like another cool choice, because I mean that was another thing where he was going for like scientific realism, and he's like, well, in space like this wouldn't be making a sound.
Yeah it's really cool. I feel like there's a lot of this movie that I could just be like, it's so cool, but it is, so whatever.
Nice. And then I love the way Dave navigates the ship after, because he just looks so upset about everything that's going on.
Yeah. Like, you gotta tune him out and just like focus on your murder task.
Yeah, you're like, I'm gonna go kill this guy. I have no qualms about it, because I just had to fucking shoot myself out of this space pod into this like fucking hallway.
I'm having a bad day.
Yeah,
just
without a helmet.
Hal's cool. We all like Hal.
Love Hal. I want to get one, like for my house.
Get one.
Do you though?
Yeah.
Why would you like? There's got to be a better way to plan to murder Hal. Like, write it down. I don't know. Do something like. There's got to be a sneakier way to do this.
Probably. I know Dave and Frank. You're like whatever.
No, Dave is so sure he can lie out. When Hal calls him out too, like, I know you're gonna unplug me, and he's like, "Where would you have gotten that crazy idea?"
It's like, stop being stupid, Dave.
I mean, Dave doesn't have a lot of good cards to play at that point, but
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
I was trying to remember. Did Dave even? He kind of goes straight to like pulling the switch on how, but like, was there a moment where he knows that the other passengers on the ship are dead? Or do we not really get that?
I don't think so. I don't think we ever see that. And they like cut, like, we don't know how long it takes between that and the next scene either, right? It's just Dave arriving at Jupiter next, but they don't say anything that happened. Like, because I assume Dave goes and calls the Earth and is like, hey, just so you know, Hal killed everybody.
I'm not tracking if that thing fails, then they lose their connection to Earth. So I don't know if they're even connected to Earth at that point.
Yeah. They don't say.
Yeah, because he's just at Jupiter and he's like, whatever, I'm gonna go check out the big obelisk. Probably not coming back. Or the big monolith. Floating around a whole planet, sure. Whatever. I'll take a pot. I'm sure it'll be fine. They're not going to put me in a human zoo. Anyway. Or do they?
Windows 98 screensaver for 10 minutes?
So that's another thing. So when you're talking about, like, you got to put yourself in the shoes of, like, people, like, there wasn't any, they filmed all that. That's photography that they're doing,
Which makes it like so much more impressive, right?
That's
like,
so crazy.
Yeah.
I
think technology didn't exist to like actually do some sort of like CGI sort of thing, right? So it's all photo technology. Yeah. I mean, he was really just like always at the forefront of like pushing like the latest advancements in like photo technology. And so obviously that's what I mean. Like George Lucas saw this movie and was just like, oh shit, like you can do this. Like, and so like this movie is so monumental for so many reasons, but I think like really just sort of so many people saw it and were inspired to like, okay, like the level has been set and like we have to do everything we can to like hit that same level, or try to hit that same level. And so like without this movie, would we have gotten the same sort of sci-fi classics that we think of like the late 70s or whatever? Like how long would it have taken us to get there if not for this movie?
Going through the visualizer in kind of like a tunnelish kind of fashion made me think of Interstellar, like when he's like in between dimensions or whatever the heck happens there, right? It's like a similar concept.
Again, it's just too bad that Kubrick ripped off Chris Nolan's film Interstellar.
Every time they do the shots of the ships too from the outside, I can only think of Star Wars because it's the same like toy ship, like they do the same thing.
The models and the forced perspective, and
that's exactly. So George Lucas was like, "Oh, okay, like this is how you do that, right?" And just like trying to, I'm sure, like read up on like the film techniques that they did for this movie, and just like as like a fucking 20 something, like, okay, this is how we did that. So like I know it can work. We just have to like spend a lot of time on it.
Much less sophisticated take, but when the whole thing started, I was like, okay, so we're on Willy Wonka's boat ride now, right? Like this is what's happening.
Pretty much. Except it puts you in the role of spoiled kid who wants candy, because you're experiencing it in first person. So some of that's through slit scan photography. I don't know what that means, but sounds fun, and I wanted to use a technical term. So it sounds to me, as a person who knows nothing about this, but I remember Chris Nolan, he keeps coming up. We did Paprika last week, which people say Chris Nolan ripped off for Inception. I didn't mean to do this twice in a row to Chris Nolan, a guy I like. And we saw the Hans Zimmer show. Obviously that features a lot of his films too. Anyway, I like Chris Nolan's movies a lot, but one thing I remember when Oppenheimer was coming out, they were crowing about how much actual photography versus CGI was in a lot of the effects and a lot of when Oppenheimer's thinking about the world ending or having anxiety and like insomnia, there's things that are like overlaid on the screen that they were actually creating in like a little tank and then shooting that. And apparently a lot of the Stargate sequence in 2001 was shot using a thing called a Cloud Tank, and in my head, that's also what Chris Nolan used. That's probably not true, but Cloud Tank sounds like the kind of thing I'm picturing how they're like getting these things. Anyway, Cloud Tank.
It's interesting, and for Kubrick, right? It's like based on necessity. Like, you know, if he was around in a time where like you could do things convincingly with CGI, like I don't know if he would have employed those techniques or not. But like, you know, for them, like they only had the analog tools. But like for Nolan, it's like an active choice, right? Just thinking that like analog subconsciously or otherwise, you know, it just like seems more realistic, and there's just like something more pure about it, where like, you know, audience members are just like so prone to like seeing so many CGI heavy things that if you like put in the extra effort to like do something in camera, that it is just like more visually impressive, and that maybe like audiences will like appreciate that in some way.
Yeah. And it makes me think about how, like, talking about like how long would it have taken us to get there if the technology wasn't developed, and mentioning George Lucas. Obviously, by the late 70s, he could make the first 3 Star Wars movies, but according to him, he had to wait for the technology to catch up 20 years later to properly depict Senate hearings on galactic trade policy. That just couldn't have been done with the technology he had available to him in the late 70s.
You see how many pods are in that room, man? Like, you can't do that.
Couldn't do it.
I just looked up pictures of the Cloud Tank because I had to know, and it makes sense. I understand.
Yaha! Cloud Tank.
Cloud Tank. Honestly, though, when you were saying Cloud Tank, all I could think of was the weird character in the Muppets Christmas Carol that like was suspended in like a tank. Yeah. Yes.
The Ghost of Christmas Past, which for decades I assumed was early CGI because it looks so creepy. But no, it's a weird doll floating in a tank of Vaseline.
Cloud Tank.
The fuck, Brian Henson? Jim Henson died, and you just think you can make greasy dolls on screen?
Dad can't say no to my weird ideas anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, Dad's not around anymore to tell me to put this slimy puppet back in its case. It's going to be the star of the movie. No, it's Vaseline puppet time. I don't care what kids want.
Shut up, Dad.
I don't care what they want. They're getting nightmares.
Yeah. Sure, we've had 2 decades of an extremely consistent formula that's worked really well, but they haven't seen a wet puppet yet.
Clearly, he was ahead of his time, because like everyone's just like Muppet Christmas Carol is like the pinnacle of Christmas.
Mm-hmm. So many things have been brought to us because they were able to, you know, try to live up to that level of Muppets Christmas Carol.
If Muppets Christmas Carol hadn't done it first, how long would it have taken for the film industry to achieve, you know, such Christmas heights?
It's an oft repeated meme, viral prompt, whatever. Like, what movie would you keep one human actor in and replace everyone else with Muppets to remake? And I think 2001's an interesting case for that.
Oh,
Keep Hal, right?
Keep Hal, everyone else is Muppets.
Yeah. When I'm just imagining the Muppets in the opeing Dawn of Man sequence too, just like what what are we watching?
It would fucking
it would fucking slap. There'd be a bunch of Muppets doing some slapstick comedy by hitting each other with sticks and whatnot.
I'm just imagining Kermit as Dave in that like last sequence where you're just like looking over at old Kermit, you know, just like eating dinner, and then like, you know, on deathbed Kermit in the bed, you know.
Oh God, I need this now.
Yeah, Dave is definitely played by Kermit, right? Like that's
Yeah,
it's a 1-to-1 casting.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it together, but a little neurotic, and his anxiety spills over sometimes.
The other Muppets are going to have to fight for the other astronaut, because let's be honest, there's not a lot of roles to go around here.
Yeah.
There's not.
His name's Frank, so I think you go with Fozzie, because that's just made for Frank Oz.
Which Muppet is playing the obelisk? The monolith.
The monolith.
So just the same monolith, but it has like one of the Muppets' face on it.
No, I think it has to be like a Muppet. Like, I don't know.
It just is a Muppet.
Gonzo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Gonzo in this one. I don't know what to tell you. Every character is played by a Muppet. The monolith is Gonzo. This is vaguely capable for the episode final cut, maybe.
Now, when this thing came out, what was the response to it?
Divisive.
That makes
sense. A lot of critics. Roger Ebert loved it, but legendary critics like Pauline Kael and Andrew Saris hated it. Pauline Kael comes up a lot only on the podcast. A lot's overstating it. We talked about her a lot in the Citizen Kane episode where she sort of mischaracterized and diminished a lot of Orson Welles' contributions there. History's sort of proven her wrong there, but she's kind of the go-to for like the American film critic. And then Ebert sort of took that over. Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 at the time and said it was like a lot of critics said like, oh, this is what's up. This is now a new level has been set. This is a whole different world now. And a lot of critics were like, this is like indulgent, masturbatory, pretentious nonsense. It's not for anyone. It's boring as hell.
Yeah, so I think for film buffs, like at the time, like Kubrick was a filmmaker whose name you heard and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go watch that movie. Like he like already had that much recognition for like, you know, I don't know if it's like specifically cinephiles or if he was even more mainstream than that. So at the studio, like I think the budget for this movie was like pretty high based on, you know, when it came out, because the studio was just like, okay, whatever. Like Stanley Kubrick is this auteur sort of filmmaker, but also the movies he makes make money. So like he did like Spartacus, Doctor Strangelove. I think those are both pretty big hits. So they're like, whatever, dude, like, you know, here's your money, go make a movie. And like, you know, the studio wasn't on set, like, you know, bossing him around or anything, because he's just one of those guys where you're just like, you just let him cook, you know. But what was a funny tidbit that or not funny, but maybe interesting, was that I think it was in theaters for like 30 days or something, and like it wasn't really doing so hot at the box office, and they were like getting ready to pull it from theaters, and then a couple of theater owners would said like, hey, don't pull the movie just yet. We've noticed this kind of like interesting thing starting to develop, which was there were like young 20-somethings that were kind of starting to show up, and, you know, have, you know, smoke some marijuana beforehand just because they had heard that there was this really trippy sequence at the end of the movie. So they were noticing this trend of like young people were coming and like the numbers were like going up and up and up. So like I think they kept it in theaters longer because of that, because people were going to have the ultimate trip. And I think they maybe started leaning into that with the marketing too. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it feels like it's a very divisive movie. Like you're either in on it or you're not. So I was kind of curious, like what general audiences would have taken to this thing.
I think like in the years after the initial release of the movie, more and more there began to be like sort of this, maybe not universal like acclaim for the movie, but definitely appreciation. Like, you know, even though some people, you know, some critics or whatever were like, oh, this is pretentious, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think in the short time afterwards, a lot more and more people began to appreciate like what it was doing, even if it wasn't upon like initial release.
Yeah. It's cool. That's my main takeaway. Yeah, I think it took a while, but now it's at the top of, or near the top of like most, you know, greatest or most influential film lists. It's always doing pretty well in Sight and Sound, especially in the director's polls. It's got quite a legacy, and is sort of watching it last night. And this is going to sound pretentious, but I told a friend I would say this is sort of like the Rosetta Stone for the last like almost 60 years of American filmmaking. It's kind of touches everything. And
the stone is the monolith.
Pretty much, yeah. Much like that gave the monkeys the ability to use tools and do murder, and maybe it gave man the ability to get to Jupiter. It gave filmmaking a heck of an upgrade in terms of its ambition and technical abilities, sort of whole cloth. this is maybe the most referenced, alluded to, parodied film we've ever done. I don't know what else would be up there.
I think years before I'd ever seen the movie, it had been referenced so many times that I kind of just was like aware of like the music from the movie, like, lines that Dave says, maybe some of the imagery. So I feel like it's like a thing The Simpsons maybe referenced a lot. Like it was sort of such a part of like the cultural zeitgeist, right? That like, in the decades that followed, like so much pop culture was just like calling back to it because it had that much of an impact on audiences at that time.
Yeah.
I feel like there's probably even so much I didn't notice, like now I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It makes sense. I think I mentioned before watching the film Double Indemnity in a film history class in college. And it's sort of like landing flat in the room because every aspect of it had been so parodied by just like any cartoon that we ever watched, or like Bugs Bunny doing a noir riff is like, oh no, they're just doing lines from the film Double Indemnity specifically. So like watching Double Indemnity today is like, oh, this is sort of like really hacky. And it's like, oh no, that just hadn't existed before. It's hard to put your head in that correct space for that. I don't have that with this though, because like it's so referenced and parodied, but there's not a lot else like it since it didn't become like a formula for other movies.
It seems like it's usually not making fun of the movie as much as it is just like an homage, like it it's like laughing with it, not at it or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Cool movie. Now, we didn't really talk about the ending too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can anyone explain to me what happened at the end of this movie? Am I supposed to understand? I assumed I was not supposed to understand.
Technically, Arthur C. Clarke can, because that whole ending is like really well explained in the novel, but Kubrick didn't want that.
I think
he wanted it mostly to be symbolism, and like you kind of get it, right?
I think it was so. Greg, I think you're not supposed to understand, and I think it's maybe why this movie is like standing the test of time as long as it had, because the way it's left sort of open-ended without like any explanation was really, I think, like a huge aspect of people like walking away from this movie, because I think what Kubrick wanted was to like spark discussion and debate, like what was this movie about, this, that. I mean, that was very intentional, and Kubrick was always really like just sort of elusive and tight-lipped, and I don't think he really in public like spoke about like the ending really and explained it in any way, because he wanted people to have this conversation, like what was going on, like, is this like some other evolution of man, like is this, like what was he trying to say by that, like what was happening with Dave, because I think the asking yourself the questions about the movie and thinking about it is much more like whatever thought-provoking than just like having the answer and be like, oh okay, that's interesting.
So. That's what I thought. I never feel like I missed anything. But it is very, the ending is really weird. It is interesting, especially too, like when you, like I said, I feel like people think about this movie, think about Hal's what we talked about the most, but Hal's kind of like a subplot, like the whole Hal killing everybody. The main plot is like, we found aliens and we're going to figure out what's going on. And the aliens apparently did something on Earth at one point too, because they pushed our evolution at some point, and now we've found them again and we're going to see them. But that's just not like it. Even though that's like the main thing, it's just, I don't know, you don't think a lot into it because of all the other things that are going on.
Yeah, I mean, I like, that when I was thinking about it after this last viewing, because like, I think this is the third time I've seen it, and every time I feel like I'm almost just as confused. But like one thing I was thinking about this time around, it was like, well, there's this like alien entity that we like know next to nothing about, and they're, pulling, mankind towards Jupiter. But you could sit there and ask, well, what's their motivation? Like, why are they like, helping, whatever mankind on Earth like advance as a society? Like, what's in it for them? Why are they doing that? What's their purpose? And it's just like there's definitely no answers for that. from this movie, but I'm just like, well, that's got to be one of the talking points from this movie. Is just like, well, what's in it for them? Like, what's going on? You know, and the movie's not interested in answering that question. It just wants you to talk about it.
Yeah, now I might be wrong, but Interstellar is also aliens are sending us to Jupiter, and we don't know why, right?
Well, I think that's one of it's definitely something that I thought about a bunch with Interstellar, but it's like with Interstellar, part of it is maybe that it's like future whatever mankind like helping itself. That's sort of like a chicken and the egg situation that I'm always like, well, how did they get there the first time to like go back and help them? And it's complicated.
In Interstellar, wherever the wormhole is placed, I forgot what planet it's placed at. Is that Saturn?
I think it's maybe they say it's like however many whatever like miles from Saturn, because they like go past it, and I think like they're like, oh yeah, the wormhole's like popped up like somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
is the idea. Yeah,
I really like Interstellar. I haven't seen it in years, but I do really like Interstellar.
Yeah, I really want to revisit it too.
You know, whatever plug Interstellar, I should get paid for this, but I think they're going to be doing a 10-year anniversary re-release in IMAX at some point, maybe in December. That movie is like a have to be seen in IMAX experience. So if it like plays near you guys, I would like highly recommend it, because it's just so good in IMAX. But true IMAX experiences with like movies that were like filmed with IMAX or like cinema. Interstellar is like maybe the best example, in my opinion.
That makes sense, that Nolan's sort of conclusion in Interstellar is humans have to help themselves. I don't know that's necessarily what Kubrick and Clarke were getting at, but it seems like, yeah, if you get into the explanation that is in the novelization or from their notes, it's like Dave goes through the Stargate, gets the aliens, grab him, they put him in like a human zoo to like observe him. Time stops having meaning for him, so it kind of like accelerates through the rest of his life. They turn him into a star baby, send him back. In the book, he explodes the entire world's arsenal of nuclear weapons.
That's fun. Good on you, dude.
Like in the satellites that are orbiting, not like on the planet, but like it's nuclear disarmament. Kubrick thought that was too much like the finale of Doctor Strangelove to end 2 movies in a row like that, exploding all of the world's nuclear weapons. So he steered away from it and went for a more symbolic just kind of thing. It's kind of so in like a rare time where Kubrick was talking about his movies years later, he said it's sort of like a lore legend sort of mythology thing. He goes through this huge ordeal, lives through his whole life, but then is transformed into this like greater being. It's sort of like a next stage of evolution thing. Or it's Zoroastrianism, maybe? The song "Thus Sprach Zoroaster" is happening. That's the sunrise part of that tone poem is the really iconic music that's playing at the beginning of Barbie. And yeah, the Nietzsche book, thus or also Sprach Zoroaster, thus spoke Zoroaster, is kind of about Zoroastrianism, sort of about becoming an Ubermensch. Maybe that's what the space baby is. I don't know. I had an Eastern religions class in college. We talked about it. That's all I remember.
Yeah, I don't know any of the words that you just said, unfortunately.
You go through an ordeal. You're like in the desert for like 40 years or something. That's something else. But you're also a lion in the desert. It's this ordeal. Then you turn into an Ubermensch, and maybe that's the space baby.
I think anyone who like walks out of the movie and says, I know exactly what that space baby was meant to convey is full of shit.
It's such a fucking like dope, like you figure it out ending to a movie with just like the absolute epic peak of the song playing while like the baby turns to look at the camera, and then
there's like no end credits, right? It's just like the music crescendos and then it's like black. Yeah.
Yeah, have a fun drive home. Like
it's a wild ending of a movie.
and you go see that movie on psychedelics, you're just like, I think I just saw God. What?
Yeah. Supposedly, people on drugs did like attack the screen and say, yelling that they were seeing the face of God during the film. But that's just like one guy said that. It's probably marketing, probably apocryphal, but someone claimed that they saw that happen.
And Stanley Kubrick had a little chuckle and was like, I did it.
I did.
I fucking nailed it.
This guy gets it.
This guy gets it.
He understands.
I don't know if you guys have seen any others, but this is the third Kubrick episode that Greg and Ray have done. Do you have a Kubrick ranking of those three?
Ranking?
So I should say, did y'all do? Y'all did Eyes Wide Shut and what else?
The Shining.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's easy. I think The Shining was my favorite. Then 2001 is a close second, and then Eyes Wide Shut I did not like.
I guess I'd probably go with that ranking too.
Yeah, you guys did not like Eyes Wide Shut
because it was bad.
I didn't like it. I mean, I didn't hate it as much as Greg did, but you know, it's at the bottom for me.
Similar pacing to this movie.
No, this movie was so slow.
The first and last 20 minutes of this movie have like no dialogue, and then there's like a 10-ish minute segment in the middle between them like going to the obelisk and someone on the spaceship actually talking, where there's just no dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say there's a lot of no dialogue.
I think they like they maybe like filmed more dialogue over the course of the movie, but like in the edit, he was just like seeing like how much dialogue he could take out of it. And like the story still work or whatever.
I think the last words in this movie are Hal singing that song, isn't it?
Pretty sure. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything. I don't think anything is spoken after that.
Yeah, and you didn't hear at the end where like the baby like comes in the screen, and then like if you like listen closely, you have your headphones on. That joke.
Yeah, you know, with the baby like pops through like concentric circles and says, "That's all, folks." Like,
I feel like that would be a Simpsons joke where it's just like Maggie as the space baby with the pacifier.
Absolutely.
There's no way they haven't done that. I know they've done it with Homer. The famous episode Deep Space Homer has a lot of 2001 references. I know Marshall and Lindsay, if you've watched a lot of other Kubrick, if you have thoughts on where this ranks in his oeuvre.
I haven't seen all of his movies. I have a couple of blind spots. I haven't seen Full Metal Jacket. I actually haven't seen The Clockwork Orange because I've always felt like I wasn't in the right headspace to see that movie, which I don't know if I ever will be, but I'll try one day. I think there's like one other one.
Have you seen Barry Lyndon?
Barry Lyndon's really good.
Yeah,
I've only seen it once.
That's my favorite Kubrick. So.
Yeah, I think it's really enjoyable. I think like y'all would enjoy it too. Because I mean, there's enough going on and it is very funny that I think it's like enjoyable for like a wider audience. What I will say is Paths of Glory is really, really good. And that was one of his like early movies. And I don't know, it's just like a really like photographically it's really strong. Performances are great, but it's like sort of a bit smaller in scale, but really captivating. Just sort of a World War I movie that I really, really enjoyed when I saw it. So that one's pretty
harrowing. Yeah, that movie's amazing.
I don't think I've seen any.
Like, speaking of harrowing, Paths to Glory is one I actually recommended to Jordan because like you're a lawyer, you'd like it. It has like some of the. I'm probably like the best World War I trench battle sequences, and then it is an amazing courtroom drama for the second half of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I was honestly because I don't know. I think the movie came out in like 54 or 50. I don't know. It was in the
57. Yeah.
But like I was just like, I couldn't believe like what he got in camera. I was just like, this is really good. Like, I mean, his background was like in photography before he did filmmaking, so like I guess maybe that explains part of it. But like, yeah, it's just really gorgeous. I mean, it is black and white, but that doesn't change the fact that it's gorgeous. That one's pretty high for me. Like, just a lot of the movies I've only seen once, so I mean, at least upon like only watching a movie once, I would probably put it at the top. I really love Doctor Strangelove. I feel like that one's great. The Shining is great. I'm not a horror person, but it's great.
It's the season.
Great for what
Watch
it
The
is.
Shining, Lindsey.
Yeah, I honestly might throw The Shining on after this. Like, I ate dinner and I was like, I don't have to go to work tomorrow? I have to work, but I don't have to go there. So like, do I like eat some pizza and watch The Shining?
I want to watch The Shining now. I was just thinking, I'm like, next time we're chilling, I'm watching The Shining.
Yeah. So I said Barry Lyndon's my favorite. I might think Barry Lyndon's his best movie, but like my emotional favorite is always going to be The Shining. I love that movie so much.
I think if you were to ask most people, they would maybe say The Shining. I don't know if it's just because it's, in the horror genre, and that's the thing that a lot of people, like. So it's more palatable. I mean, maybe, I don't know if it would be considered like the most commercial of his movies. I mean, I guess you could say Spartacus, but like no one our age has seen that movie. So, yeah, I feel like most people would say The Shining.
Yeah. Yeah. On a scale of 0.5 to 5, on any scale of your choosing, what would you give the 1968 Stanley Kubrick classic, 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I'm ready. I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 in-flight Capri Sun meals.
No, that's what I was gonna do.
You should have
been
been
scared with my one object. I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to rank it. Man.
Too bad.
All right.
I'll say 4.5 out of 5 lip reading killer robots.
I'm gonna do 3.5 out of 5 little pods, spaceship pods.
Mm.
I like that the spaceship pods have T-Rex arms, by the way.
Great.
I forgot to mention that.
They're so cool.
I think I'm gonna do 3 out of 5 grippy shoes.
Nice.
I'm going to go 5 out of 5 Zoroasters who spoke thusly. This is a good spread.
We got a full rating spectrum here.
Yeah, I think we all gave it a different ranking. That's maybe the first time that's happened with this many people.
3 to 5. Wow.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I think a good, it's a good cross section and probably a fair representation of the general opinion on the film.
It's definitely like, for me, there's so much to like admire and appreciate about this movie, and like I try to put it in the context of coming out in 1968, and I can't really completely do that because I've seen all the movies that came out after it, so it's not the same. But so like all of that being said, and how much there is to appreciate about that movie, it's hard for me to give it the full 5 because I'm just like, I do find that there's stretches of movies where I'm just a little bored. And I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
But it would be, I think, different seeing it like the theater, the old historic theater in Austin, like shows it like every summer, and I've just never made it a point to go to it.
I think it'd be different.
It would play way better in a theater. Yeah.
Or if it was 60 years ago.
Yeah, that part's key too, for sure.
If you caught me on a different day, I probably would have rated it higher, but I was just kind of
You
mad
need to be
about
in the right mood for this film because it's so slow. There's so many stretches of you're just watching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You do need, like I said, I liked it quite a bit more the first time I saw it, actually.
I guess. I feel like, I don't know. There was a lot about the movie to like, but I feel like it just didn't all come together for me. And I do feel like it was a little bit pretentious.
I think that's all fair. It's like a little bit of a mood board for stretches of it. And so if you're in a bad mood. The question we've been threading throughout all these episodes, we did a lot of dystopian like action movies this month. So it's been harder. Oh, I should say it's going back to look at the future month, a whole month long, this I should have said an hour and a half ago, a whole month long look at movies that were set in the future when they came out, but the year they were set in has already happened. The best example of that is probably 2001: A Space Odyssey, since the number's right there in the title. This question's been hard on some of the other episodes where it just looks like everything's gone really badly, but it won't be as hard this time. What is something from this vision of its future that you wish had existed at the time it was set? So in our real world in 2001, what depicted here is something you would have been down to have existing?
In-flight Capri Sun meals.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a thing, no? Like the astronauts kind of drink their food and stuff. Right?
Yeah, Greg, you aimed pretty low for what was possible, but I guess if that's what you want,
I want it on a plane, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was trying to think more in the context of
technological advancement, typically, but Greg didn't have Capri Sun on an airplane in 2001.
Well, because there's a lot of stuff that are in the movie that I think we maybe did have by 2001. So like it was good at predicting certain things, but like we don't straight up have like a base on the moon and like commercial flights to space stations and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it is cool to see the things they were right about. I mean, I don't know when the International Space Station first got put into orbit. Obviously, it doesn't look like it does in this movie. It looks way cooler in this movie. But some of that stuff like did come to fruition. We just aren't so far along as far as the moon base and flying to Jupiters are concerned.
I'm like, do I really should I do we want a base on the moon? How would that practically impact my life? I mean, I guess it probably would, right?
Maybe if we did, we would have gone that by now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be tough if you have to take work trips there, and you have to miss your daughter's party. He didn't specifically say it was their birthday, right? It was just her party.
No, I think it was her birthday.
It was her birthday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if there was
a
base on the moon, every Tuesday and Thursday, Brown would be like, "Ben, we really need you to go to this conference on the moon."
Yeah, we need someone there to take notes to do some live tweets from the moon conference. So go back to the moon.
Cool aspect about the movie is that because it's sort of this like commercial flight, the lack of interest this character has, like he's straight up asleep while he's like going to space and then going to the moon, right? Like couldn't be bothered. Whereas like, you know, if you're thinking about any normal person being on this flight, they'd be like looking out the window and like wouldn't be able to sleep. And like, I thought that was a cool idea that this movie had, was just like the, you know, been there, done that. This is just like a normal work thing, you know, no need to be awake.
On that. She was like, why is he just constantly sleeping? And I was like, I sleep on every flight I go on.
Yeah.
He's
like, okay, bored, jaded.
That's a superpower.
Yeah. Damn you, Greg.
So that's another part of the division, an opinion over the movie and what it's supposed to mean and what it's trying to say is some people think of it as like a really optimistic look at future, and some people thought it was like really cynical and like deeply satirical. And I think especially that segment, you get both. It's like, oh, we have all these great amenities and it's like so futuristic and stuff. And it's like, and we just turned it into a fucking mall. The movie Ad Astra, which I hadn't mentioned yet, got to get everything into this, is way much more literal. We turned it into a mall when he gets to, I think he gets to the moon and it's just like a mall, right?
When you started saying what that like previous statement, I immediately started thinking about Ad Astra, and I was like, that almost feels like the most like spiritual successor to like 2001, like if there is one, because that one was also kind of divisive and like sort of slowly paced and not a lot of dialogue, but like really good.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Ad Astra, just imagine like, what if you didn't have a great relationship with your dad? That's Ad Astra. And all to say, Ad Astra is really good. I feel like when I got around to watching it, because it got like not a super well, great critical response. But then when I watched it, this is awesome.
It was, I think, for similar sort of reasons to what people thought about 2001. You know, it's kind of slow, kind of pretentious. You know, it's interesting. I feel like you could probably unpack like a lot of similarities between those two movies.
Yeah. One interesting thing I didn't even pick up on until doing research for this is that, like, previous Kubrick films, this originally had voiceover, one of the many parts of the dialogue that got stripped out. And that's something that is in Ad Astra. There's a lot of voiceover, right? Narration.
It's been a minute since I've seen it, but yeah, I think it's like I think it's like Brad Pitt, like Brad Pitt's the main character, doing like narration. Anyways, we're getting a little too nerdy. I apologize.
I didn't like it.
It's okay. It seems like the groups decided to reject the question for this month.
I think I want my Capri Sun pouches.
Yeah, Greg gave a weird answer, and everyone else was like, "I think it's bad, actually," which is really funny because, like, we did like Predator 2 and like The Running Man, and still got answers for that. But like this Vision of the Future, everyone's just like, "No thanks, this sucks."
No, I think so. I was gonna say, because it seems that like traveling to the moon and stuff is so casual, I feel like traveling around Earth would be like much better. You know, like I feel like, you know, it wouldn't have like super long flights and stuff. I feel like it would be much quicker travel. So I would appreciate that.
I like it. High speed international rail or something.
Yeah.
Zero gravity. I think that would be fun to experience.
I already said I want a HAL 9000 for my house.
You did say that.
Yeah.
One thing I did notice about this movie was, you know, like way far back, how flying used to be this big thing. You know, you got dressed up and it was fancy and like, you know, a big luxury to go flying. And that's not what it is now. I feel like that, I don't know, that didn't go away in this. Like it's still like a big like to-do, and, you know, you have I don't know, all kinds of things in the flight.
You're wearing like a full three-piece suit. It's like a gentleman's activity.
Right, yeah.
Like you kind of know everyone else on the plane for some reason.
So I thought that was interesting.
And you like chat about work and like, "Oh, we'll come see you in the summer." I love the sort of like vague transatlantic accents that most people have in that segment of it, besides the Russian folks, but you know, everyone else.
Now, would it be rude if I put my HAL 9000 like right outside the front door, like a Ring doorbell cam, if that's where I left it?
I thought you were just gonna put it like, you know, like in your bedroom, just like, you know, right above the bed, or, you know, somewhere to make it like as creepy as humanly possible.
What if he didn't let you make cookies?
I'm sorry. I opened the oven door. I need to make cookies. I'm sorry, Greg. I can't do that. You've had 24 tonight.
It is sort of like the smart home devices like Alexa or whatever. Like it is in some ways like that. I mean, I think the imagery of the red dot is like really unsettling, and there's probably a reason why Google didn't make their device look like that. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of there a little bit.
We are. And it is just like, we could all agree it's too bad that Stanley Kubrick ripped off LeVar Burton's Smart House for HAL.
The guy doesn't have an original thought.
God, it's fucked up.
Did LeVar Burton make that movie?
He did.
You learn something new every day, folks.
I think it's like one of 2 things he's ever directed. It's really weirdly shot. He's not in it, which you'd think he would be. He's not.
He had to focus on his job, all right.
You got to focus on something.
I mean, he made that movie and he was just like, well, I made a masterpiece. I think I'm good. I'm going to retire now.
It's a lot of close-ups, LeVar. I don't know if you needed them.
He's like, you don't understand. They're trapped in this house. It's
so smart. Like, no, I get it, LeVar. Anyway, that's a movie that's, of the many things we've referenced as being direct inspirations, I guess Barbie counts, and then Smart House is the only other one we've done on the podcast. We haven't done Interstellar. We haven't done Ad Astra. Nothing thinky. Smart House we did. Why not? Next week, tune in for the start of Sam Neill-Ween. I think. I haven't fully committed to it. I just came up with like, what if we did all Sam Neill movies? My brain immediately, what if it was called Sam Neill-Ween? And my brain hasn't allowed me to come up with another idea yet.
You can add Oween to like a lot of things. There's a lot of options.
If Sam Neill Oween proves anything, it is that.
Sam Neill ends in 2 L's at least. It's once his last name is one syllable that ends in 2 L's. So it's kind of 1-to-1. It's like a really easy like transition. You couldn't do it on any of our names.
Halloween, and it's all parodies of 2001.
All right. We're going to have to do Smart House again. Thank you to...
It's a good movie.
Good movie. Thank you to Lindsey, Greg, Ray, and Marshall for being on this episode.
Woo!
No problem. Woo.
Thank you to the robots. Greg, Keir, Cal, Tars. That's one of the monoliths that can walk in Interstellar. Tars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tars and Case and Interstellar are low-key MVPs. They're both great.
They're really good.
They have their unique personalities.
Yeah, maybe we should have a good robot month.
Good robot month.
Mm-hmm.
We're way past the end of the episode. You can find our stuff on Linktree, linktr.ee/late to the movies. Thanks everyone for being on this episode and for all your time. We went pretty long on this one.
No problem. Anytime.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's on theme with the movie. We just move real slow.
Think about what weird Sam Neill movie you guys want to watch next.
I guess I'll have to look at the list.
I'll keep that in mind.
Or I'll come up with a different idea, but I just like Sam Neill Oween as a concept. It might not be super fun in execution. Thanks, guys.